Welcome to another episode of Cross Border Talks, where we continue to follow what is going on in the wider region of Central and Eastern Europe. And we are going to point our attention today to the Republic of Moldova. Recently, there has been a lot of diplomatic activity on the eastern flank of NATO, with Poland and Romania being very active in their foreign policy, and a lot of this movement has been connected somehow to the Republic of Moldova, where there is some intensive political contradictions, and it looks like there are some discussions that Moldova might be moving closer to the Western camp, but of course facing also resistance to that. And we're going to be joined for this discussion by Cristian Bolotnikov, who is a journalist and historian. He works for Agora MD, which is a media of young and modern people from the Republic of Moldova. Welcome to the program, Cristian. Thank you for joining us. And we are, and the first question will be put by my colleague Małgorzata Kulbachevska.
Hello, everybody. Before I actually ask this question, I ask everybody who is listening to us or watching us to subscribe to Cross Border Talks so that you don't miss any episodes. We are available on sound-only platforms like SoundCloud or Spotify. We are also available on YouTube, so however you want to follow our programs, it is possible. And today, indeed, we will be discussing the Republic of Moldova, a state which, whenever it appears on Polish media, is usually portrayed as a state that is in a kind of crossroad position, having most of the citizens oriented towards the West, with very pro-Western president, very pro-Western government, which, by the way, comes from the same political camp as the president Maia Sandu, but also with minorities who still look at Russia with a kind of nostalgia, with a kind of hope, not exactly known what kind of hope. And however, for the moment given, the president of Moldova is calling the citizens to confirm the pro-European orientation. And she asked basically all the citizens of Moldova to appear in Chisinau on 21st May during a national assembly and to confirm the pro-European orientation of the society. The name of the event is, she calls it a Great National Assembly, is a clear allusion to some breakthrough historical moments in Moldovan history, such as the mass meeting of 27 August 1981, a crucial date in the modern history of Moldova. And I wanted to ask you, what do you expect from this event? And what could be the European reaction to it? How realistic are Moldova's European ambition? And how popular is this pro-European current, pro-Western current in the Moldovan society?
Okay, thank you for the question. Thank you for inviting me here. I will start by saying that in the first place, in the history of Moldova, it's the Republic of Moldova. It's very important to note that because Moldova is more related to the medieval state. When we are talking about Republic of Moldova, we are talking about like the successor of Soviet Moldova because we have the same borders, the same territory as was designed in 1940 by Soviet Union. About this Grand Assembly, Grand National Assembly, yes, it's very important because this this announcement was also made in a context that was very interesting because in that day the President Maia Sandu just issued a statement in which she said that she will have an address to all the Moldovan people. It was the first time when she used something like that. She used before that when she was only president-elect, but now she was talking about, in a context where Moldova is pretty, Moldovans are pretty anxious about the war in Ukraine and the economy, and we were just try to guess what was the big announcement. So we were kind of not really satisfied with the method that President Maia Sandu chose to deliver this message. But this Grand Assembly is very important because in the first place, this historical illusion is correct. In Moldova, we had the first National Grand Assembly on 31st of August 1988, when the Soviet authorities accepted to introduce this Romanian language, but with the mention that it was called Moldovan with Latin alphabet. And the second Grand National Assembly was on 27 August 1991, when the Moldova proclaimed its independence. It was after the coup d'etat, this failed attempt in the Soviet Union. What do I expect from this event? Well, in the first place, I expect to see, as a journalist, I expect to see how popular is still Maia Sandu in Moldova, because the last 2 years were pretty, pretty hard for her and for her government, because it was the high inflation, the war in Ukraine, and also this row of protests from the pro-Russian oligarchy offshore. Also, this move from Maia Sandu is a challenge for her party and her presidential administration, because it's an attempt to unify the whole pro-European segment from the political, political landscape in Moldova. And there were also calls for signing a so-called Snagov Pact, like in Romania, like a document that will be signed by all political parties in Moldova, no matter they are pro-Russian or pro-European, in order to guarantee this process of European integration. But unfortunately, this is not possible. So the only possible variant is this Grand Assembly, because Moldova's European ambitions are realistic with the current government, but we don't know what will be after 2025, when another government may come into power. But there is a large European majority in the Moldovan society. Like from the last opinion polls, it was like around 58% of Moldovans are pro-European, and this is a stable majority from in the past like 10 years or 15 years. So I think this is like a confirmation how popular is President Maia Sandu, and also the idea of European integration of Moldova.
You mentioned already the issues of the internal situation in Moldova, and I think we could add a little bit more context here. Could you tell us how did Moldova change after 24th of February of 2022? How did the Russian invasion of Ukraine influence your country? What were the consequences of the refugees coming to Moldova as well? Could you tell us more?
Yes, the war in Ukraine changed a lot in our countries. In the first place, this was for the first time when Moldova really and directly confronted Russia on some issues. So in the first place, I would say that the war in Ukraine brings in Moldova a very high inflation, that a very high inflation that kind of ruined the the buying power of majority of Moldovans, and this has injured the population. About the Ukrainian refugees, there was no big problem with them. We accepted them, we tried to help them. There was a unity in society. It was a rare demonstration of unity in the Moldovan society, because every party from right to left, from pro-Russian to pro-European, pro-Romanian, and so on, were trying to help. And this was a very good thing, and this is one of the biggest remarks that Moldovan diplomacy is telling to other countries. This slogan, "Small country, big heart." It's referring to the refugees that we at one time, I think in April or May 2022, we had like the highest number of refugees per capita in Europe. I didn't see any problems with the Ukrainian refugees. There were some trying from the pro-Russian extremist parties to discredit the whole idea of helping Ukrainians, but it wasn't a widely popular idea. But in the same time, despite this massive coming of refugees, it didn't change a lot the opinion of Moldovans about the war in Ukraine. I remember that one of my colleagues was making an interview last year in some Ukrainians live, regions where Ukrainian lives, and the Russians, and most of them just say that like Ukraine is it's Ukraine's fault that this war started, or Russia is not the only who is guilty in this case. So another change, if I'm thinking about this war in Ukraine, is that the European integration of Moldova is now like guaranteed under this government, because this is the only way in which Moldova could exist and have the possibility to develop as a country. But in the same time, we have to face multiple crises: the pandemic crisis, refugee crisis, energy crisis. When the, for example, gas prices skyrocketed for like 6 or 7 times. I mean, from like few euro cents that we were paying, we are now paying like €1.50 for one cubic meter of gas, and so on. This would be like the biggest changes that we've seen in Moldova in this after 1 year and some months after the war started.
For Sandu's administration, there is also another challenge even before the war. Sandu's administration actually appeared in a country which used to be ruled by one oligarch from the backseat, who used to be labeled as a failed state due to the huge influence Vladimir Plahotniuc had over everything in Moldova. To what extent has Maia Sandu's administration, Maia Sandu's people managed to heal the situation, to modernize the country?
Well, there is the biggest problem, because during the Plahotniuc times, it was also the failed state, and the parliament adopted in 2019, after the forming of European and pro-Russian party coalition, they adopted a declaration where they say that Moldova is a captured state by the oligarchs. There is a big problem from the President Maia Sandu's administration and her parliamentary majority, because they cannot find people who are willing to work and to change the system. There are few people who are accepting to change the system, and the causes are a lot. For example, most of the people just emigrated, are part of diaspora, so they don't want to come in Moldova to work for low wages. Or they don't have, we have some people who work in the system, they want to change the system, but they don't have this guarantee that this change will happen. One example is the justice system. The justice system is very corrupt, and it was one of the most controlled by the oligarchs. And we have seen that since the start of this pre-vetting process, the judge adopted some very controversial decision, like to liberate some oligarch friends, but in the same time they adopted some favorable decision to the state, like the reinstating the state property on the Chisinau airport that was belonged to one oligarch, Ilan Shor. So this is a pretty big change from the for the Sandu's administration to reform the justice, because first there are probably not enough people. The first probating evaluation of judges showed us that only like 20% of the judges that were evaluated passed this evaluation, and all of them were like from the first level courts. No one was from the appeal courts or from the Supreme Justice courts. About the Supreme Justice courts, I want to say that now is like a blockage. The institution simply cannot work because the majority of judges resign. They didn't say why, but we understand that they resign because they don't want to be verified, because the verification that is evaluation, preventing evaluation that is very strict, would find some problems in their world. And also the new law stipulate that if they don't pass the evaluation, they would be expelled. They can be expelled from, could be expelled from the justice system. They could lose all the privilege, so they choose just to left the system. So it's a pretty big challenge, because the government isn't having enough people to make this change happen, or isn't giving enough guarantees to those people who want to change the system. Like in the justice, I've said there are a minority probably of judges, or probably a majority of judges that want to change the system, but they see what happened in 2020, 2019, when a few judges tried to change the system. The pro-European government failed, the oligarchs came back, and those judges were marginalized. They were near to be expelled from the system, so they now don't want to engage in such a very, it's a challenge for them and also for the government, because they don't have enough support, and they don't want to repeat the experience that they had in 2019. So it's very important to know that the change in administration and in justice is still awaited. The fight with corruption is still probably more a story, because most corrupt people are just arrested, and after several months they just go back in the public life like nothing happened. And to modernize the country also is a challenge, because the most of the money that need to be invested into these infrastructure projects and so on cannot, because the government had to spend on projects like giving compensation from the citizens during the winter time, when because the prices are very hard, and the government was giving compensation also for the people and for some companies. So we just don't have enough money to evolve and to modernize in this area. Nevertheless, to mention that most of the money are borrowed from internal market or from international funds. So it's pretty hard to realize this mission.
Okay, there one more question from my side before I pass the voice to Vladimir. There was Ilan Shor mentioned twice already in this talk, and I am asking myself this question: how could anybody trust this man who is now organizing the protests against the government? How could people listen to his calls to go and demonstrate against Baja Sandu if they know what was the role of Shor in Moldovan politics before? That what was his role in the scandal of stealing an enormous sum from the banking system? And so I wanted to ask about these protests and these people who are participating in them. How genuine movement is this, and what is the motivation of the participants?
Yes, well, in the first place, we need to understand who are these people, and we need to, if we look at some images from the protest, we will see that most of these people are old or younger people, but from the rural area. They just are most poor people who have low pensions, low wages, or no work at all, low education, or no education, educational background, and so on. So they just, it's not like they believe him. It's like they don't have any other choices to make money for the living. So for them to make like 20 euro just in a day, just to travel to Chisinau, which is paid, to get some free food and to be present at that protest just for the number, and to get for that 20 euro, it's pretty much amount for them. And that's why we see a lot of people participating in Shor marches and protests. And also, I want to say that in the last fall, these amounts of money were even higher, especially when Shor established a so-called City of Liberty near the parliament. There was some rumors that he was paying for the night like 100 euro. It's a pretty much amount of money for the for the Moldovans who live in the rural areas, which are pretty poor, and there are not enough jobs. So that's why, in the first place, we see a lot of people participate, had a lot of money. The protest process kind of stopped for a moment during the winter. They say because it's winter, it's cold, but most probably the protest stopped because the prosecutors confiscated a lot of money. There were several times when the prosecutors, confiscated the money that were like literally transferred in the bag, like black bag, which is a symbol of corruption in Moldova. And the Shor members party, they just give the money, a full bag of money, and there was like something normal. Now there are rumors that Shor has new again money because Russia is financing him, and the fact that the people are paid is proved also by prosecutors and by some investigation made by Moldovan journalists. And about how could the movement evolve now that Shor was sentenced to prison in absentia, I could say that we need to wait for another important moment that will come, I think, in 2 or 3 weeks, when the Constitutional Court will discuss if the Shor party will be banned in Moldova, which will be like the first time when they will take such a decision. And after that, I think depend of the Constitutional Court decision if they will just ban the party and will not reflect on its members, or if they will ban also the party and also the members' participation in the political lives. And similar decision, we will see what will evolve. But now I could say just this: if Shor has enough money, he will have this organize this protest. And it's not only Shor, I want to say that it also rumors that Plahotniuc is trying to came back in Moldova, and he is like buying a lot of local officials that were elected in wave of preparation for the local election that will take place in this fall. So it's like an active investment in the people in Moldova, a direct investment, if I can say.
You mentioned that Moldova needs money, and there has been international supporters of Moldova, especially of this government, such as Romania and the Moldova platform, where Germany, France, and Romania cooperate. And on the other hand, Poland, his Polish Prime Minister, has recently backed a fast-track entrance of Moldova in the EU. So, what is to what extent Poland and Romania are key allies or supporters of Moldova, and what is the nature of the relations with these two countries?
First, with Romania, I can say that the nature of relations are now, I can say that Moldova-Romanian partnership is at the, I think, highest level that has ever been, because there is a lot of common projects. Romania gave us like 100 million euros. Also, we had a lot of common projects. We brought electricity from Romania during the energy crisis in the last fall. And also Romania is actively supporting us in the European Union. Not just once our foreign affairs minister had said that Moldova had de facto 2 foreign ministers, him and his Romanian homologue. So I would say that the partnership with Romania is very important to Moldova. At some extent, we can say that Moldova exists just because Romania chose to help, and chose to help more than was like in the last 30 years. In the last 30 years, Romania helped Moldova mostly in the cultural area, in the educational area, some infrastructure projects, but now they helped us with money, with electricity, with some gas. So it's a very important partnership for the Republic of Moldova. Also, speaking of Poland, it's also an important ally because we have some project at lower scale with Poland. I think 10 years ago, Poland gave us like a big amount of money as a credit for the agricultural projects to finance and to support agriculture in Moldova. And also there was during the energy crisis in the fall of 2021, Poland was one of the countries who offered to help us, but because of some technical problems, price, and so on, it couldn't. And I cannot say that the partnership with Poland now is at a large scale that it was ever before, but surely Poland is also an important friend of Moldova, and we have to see how it will continue, because we see a pretty big difference between Poland's, let's say, way of doing politics with and supporting Ukraine, and also Poland ways of supporting Moldova, which is more like it's like in the shadow of Moldova-Romanian partnership.
Okay, the Republic of Moldova is also known for having groups of people who are Russian-speaking, and these are various minorities such as the Gagauz, the Bulgarians, Russians, and others. How is this population perceiving the recent changes in the country after the establishment of the government of Dorin Recean? For example, this switch from Moldovan towards Romanian language, which was officialized. So it is believed, it is now considered that the language of the country is Romanian. And in general, how is the population seeing these changes, which maybe lead to some form of abandoning of its state of neutrality?
First, I want to say that as historian, speaking of history, these minorities in Moldova they exist even when this land was called Bessarabia, was annexed by Russia in the 19th century. Also, during the Soviet times, there were also some politics designed just to make sure that there were half from minorities enough powerful in Moldova, and during the years of when Moldova tried to gain its independence, 1989, 1991, there was huge problems and tensions in this Russian-speaking areas, or the Gagauz people or Bulgarian people. There was a lot of tension, but Moldova kind of managed to solve the problems with Gagauz and Bulgarians, not the same with the Russian in Transnistria. In the first place, about the language. About the language, I want to say that I think that in Moldova, there aren't the times like in the 90s when the language was like a real problem. Yes, the language was changed to Romanian, but it wasn't that apocalyptic reaction that some analysts, some pro-Russian politicians were trying to say that it will happen if we change the language from Moldovan to Romanian and so on. It wasn't such a big reaction. I would say that from those regions, there was a big reaction and a more visible reaction when the government adopted the Istanbul Convention. Or when the government is speaking about neutrality. But with the language, there is it's not such a big problem in Moldova nowadays. About the neutrality and how they perceive all these changes, I would say that in the first place, the relation between Chisinau and Gagauzia is a cold one. I would want to say that on the next Sunday there will be election in Gagauzia for the governor post, and the governing country, which is now in power in Moldova, didn't participate in this election. They didn't want to came with a candidate, a pro-European candidate, and this is like a indicator that pro-European countries, just pro-European parties can't change the situation in this region. Also, some local journalists, have told that all the candidates that are in Gagauzia and are running to become the next governors, they just spread the Russian propaganda. It's not like an electoral campaign where we'll do that. They'll just spread the Russian propaganda. And that's why the Gagauz people and probably also a part of Bulgarians, they just don't accept this change. Despite the fact that the actual governor of Gagauzia, Mrs. Irina Vlach, said that if Moldova chooses to go to the European Union, Gagauzia will follow. Also, in the first months of war, there was some protests in Gagauzia, and there were some big messages to Chisinau, like we want with Russia, we don't appreciate the actual change. There was like a legal confrontation when the parliamentary majority from Chisinau adopted a law that was banning this war symbols like the letter B or the letter Z or the saint, this yellow and black panglik. The Gagauzian local parliament adopted a law that were practically canceled the national law, and they had a dispute in the court where the central government won. So, in conclusion, I would say that for the moment there is a unity in society, but the pro-European sentiments and pro-European views aren't available just for like the center of Moldova, south without Gagauzia, uh, a bit of north. And this is because also, despite the fact that the European Union invested a lot and Romania invested a lot in Gagauzia, they were making building schools or repairing schools or and also products like that. It didn't change the situation, and I think it will not change until the Moldova central government will start to have more interest in what is happening in Gagauzia now.
Okay, I just wanted to ask, in short, if possible, maybe last question: how likely do you think it is that the status of neutrality is abandoned and Moldova moves closer to the Western countries in a very determined way and agreed also by them, by the Western countries?
I don't think this is likely because there isn't a real discussion about abandoning this status. There is a real discussion about increasing the military spending. There is a real discussion, a real debate. So the people are discussing it, are accepting that yes, we need to spend more money on military just in order if you want to defend. But abandoning the neutrality status isn't likely because the supporters of the idea that Moldova should join NATO are like 30, 35, 38% in the Moldovan society, according to the last opinion polls. So I don't think this is likely in the near future.
Okay, Vladimir, you actually asked the question I wanted to ask. So I think that we could end our talk at this point. Well, Moldova's recent history, I think, is a lesson to everybody. It's a very interesting case of a country that wants to break with the oligarchical past, which has an active part of a society which wants to heal the country, which does not want to live in a failed state. However, this story also shows how difficult it is. What you said about Santos administration struggling to fight corruption, struggling to find people ready to work for the state when the state cannot offer a lot but low wages. This is a very important also, I think, for the European Union as a whole. For if European Union wants to spread its values, wants to spread to the East, it must be also ready to encounter such societies and such countries. Anyway, we can only wish Moldova good luck and further development. And once again, thank you, Christian, for being with us this evening. And I would like to ask everybody who listened or watched the video to subscribe to Cross Border Talks. See you again.